Okay, so let's arrive. And I'm going to read Nikki's New Zealand prayer for us to what I like to refer to as opening an Enneagram. Knowing that the Enneagram is this mysterious portal, and we don't really know what it is or where it came from, that when we work with it, we are opening an Enneagram, and that becomes the sacred space in which we're working and in which certain things can come to light. So I like to just bless this space and to acknowledge that the work that we do with the system is incredibly profound and life-changing, and that we bring the reverence to what it's about, this kind of work and these kinds of spaces. So enjoy this blessing, and if there's any particular word or phrase that stands out for you, just note if something moves your heart, take it in. We come together in the spirit of learning, exploring, and healing for ourselves, the wider community, and the world as a whole. I give thanks to those I'm about to invite as we work with and facilitate all from the highest light source. I ask that this room, building, and grounds become a sacred space. I ask that each of your rooms, buildings, and grounds become a sacred space, and that this space between us, this room, and this web between us become a sacred space. So welcome to Mother Earth, Father Sky, Grandfather Sun, Grandmother Moon. Welcome to the children of Tane, the elementals, the four winds, and the deities of the many winds. Welcome to the spirits of the land, of this land, of your lands. May we be in right relationship with you, giving thanks for the blessings received today. Welcome to the four directions and the guardians of the four directions. Welcome to Hawk from the east, bringing clear vision and new perspectives. Spread your wings wide, traveling the spirit worlds while fully grounded in the world of everyday life. Welcome, Dragonfly from the south, bringing loving magic into our lives, a messenger of change and transformation, the keeper of dreams. May we dream our true potential and float on the wind gently. Welcome, Kingfisher from the west. Teach us the insights showing in reflection of forgiving others and oneself, letting go and moving on with purpose. Welcome, Owl from the north and the land of our ancestors. With each new death, a doorway opens, seeing in the dark, knowing the voice before creating anew. Welcome to our compassionate spirits, well and healed ancestors, our power animals, our angels, our teachers and guides, thanking you in advance for the healing already occurring. I ask that you in all surround us in an extra layer of protection, a cloak of invisibility as and when needed. Only those of the highest original light source may enter this space, and anything not of the highest light must leave now. Only those of the highest original light source may enter this space, and anything not of the highest light must leave now. Only those of the highest original light source may enter this space. Anything not of the highest light must leave now. Knowing as we enter into the mysteries, we transform, so we are seeing with new eyes, with soul eyes, comfortable stepping into ambiguity. Thank you for guiding and empowering us today and always as we journey in the universe and in ourselves. So just take a moment to notice what landed for you. And I've noticed that with that prayer, every single time I hear it, a different thing resonates and stays with me. So just maybe jot that down to take away for later. So welcome heartfully to our session tonight on Enneagram 1. Welcome from all our countries and spaces. And I just want to first, before we go any further into whatever themes we're going to be dealing with tonight, I want to introduce my comrades here who are going to be supporting me and bringing their history of learning, wisdom, and experience in this work. Esteemed and very much appreciated colleagues in this work. And Cicci, maybe you can introduce yourself first. Cici's published some books on the Enneagram, so don't miss that piece.
No, I can start with that. It's on the bio thing, which you have somewhere in there. No.
Maybe you can talk to this one, just talk about your history of doing this work and the kinds of things you do
No,
now.
okay. I don't know what because I'm seeing a window with lots of windows in it.
Oh, okay. Thanks for telling me because I wasn't.
Now I'm seeing you. That's fine too.
Don't think people came to look at me.
Oh,
Okay.
no, that's
Okay.
me.
So maybe Cicci, yeah, just
Yeah.
your
I
background in this work.
I came I think I came across the Enneagram before that, but I came across the Enneagram for real, and it sort of stuck in the late 90s after having had some upheaval in my life and started doing various extreme forms of experiential inner growth thingies. And so when I found the Enneagram, it was from that side. It was from inner growth, from wanting to expand into something more, possibly, or sink into something deeper, or whatever we want to visualize that as. But so it didn't reveal so much. There wasn't much news as far as inner work, but it was very striking how well it could. Once I got over the fact that somebody presented this to me and said, "Oh, you're a 9 because you have this disease, and everybody with that disease is a 9." And I was like, "Okay." And then I realized, no, I'm not a 9. I'm actually an 8. And I read the 4 words that Don Riso and Ross Hudson used to describe types, and I read those words for the 9 to my mum, and she almost, she dislocated something, I think, laughing so hard. But still, it was after that, and when I started researching, studying whatever Don and Russ's work, it really resonated with me because I loved how they would, how clearly they would present stuff in like the same. If I could find out this bit about the 4, I could also find out this bit about the 6 and the 2, and it was very neatly organized, which appealed to me a lot. So that's where I later trained and certified. And so where I keep ending up as an Enneagram teacher or facilitator or whatever is with not so much with courses saying this is a 1, this is a 2, etc., but more with the aspects that go across the board, like the centers, looking at the centers from the center's point of view, not from a type point of view, but from what is the gut, what is the heart, what is the head, and that kind of thing. And the instincts, same way. The levels of development, Q today, same way, because I find it absolutely fascinating how these things all, match so well. It's so clear that this is not something that somebody invented or thought up, but rather this is just something that is, and that somebody sort of discovered. And so, yeah, I keep getting to those bits, and I do teach about them, but I do that so I can eventually get people to come to things where it's not about the teaching. We know about the levels, but it's about experiencing the whatever we can do from this knowledge. And so that's where I usually come from. I wrote 2 books so far in English. One is Aspects of You on the Centers and Instincts, and the other one is The Enneagram Way that came out recently, which is not so much about the Enneagram, actually. It's about you, or it's about inner work, but an Enneagram informed inner work, as it were. And I've got 2 upcoming projects too. It's what I do when I can't get my fun about doing what I should be doing. I write another book. So that's, yeah. I blame it on my 7 wing.
Blame us. I blame all my stuff on my 8 wings. So.
Of course we do. I think it's called disownment.
Disownment.
I've written something about that, I'm sure. And I don't know, should I go on? Is this enough?
I think that's a cool intro to start off with. And yeah, I think, Sam, if you can also just give an intro, bearing in mind we want to get started with content, so we leave enough space for your practice. I think that's the really key part of today. And the levels. I can cut mine down a bit. Sam, if you can introduce your work, and yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my background is a creative arts background, originally studying literature and theatre, and getting quite intrigued by the performative aspects of self, the pieces of self that are kind of always seemed a bit unstable, that people could take on another character and they could perform a self and all of this. So when I discovered Enneagram, which was a lot later than that, there was a lot of dot joining. And then when I got very, very kind of in touch with nature as a way of reconnecting with myself in the middle of COVID times when everything felt slightly bonkers, there was kind of another set of dots to join for me. And in the meantime, I discovered I was a 6 after a kind of a journey backwards and forwards in the Enneagram. And a lot of these things about, unstable selfhood, needing to correspond with something outside self, being relational, all of these things sort of started to make sense and cohere into a set of practices. So my piece today is going to be offering some creative practice working with imagery. But if you find that it moves you and it gives you an inner yes, these are just the ways that you could look a little bit more into what I'm doing. I have a Substack, and that's new, but I'm very excited about it. And I have a website. I trained with Ingrid. My Enneagram coaching training is as a trauma-informed coach. I've also worked and trained on some of Cicci's programs. So I feel like I'm in this amazing kind of situation today as offering something with 2 people whose work I really respect. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's a ditto for me. Yeah. Wonderful. So we said we'd be speaking to you about the developmental impact of small t or complex trauma on Enneagram 1's type patterns. And I've got a kind of coaching, supervision, training coaches is the school that I run. It's very much about trauma-informed training for coaches. So I come with my client's mindset. And so I'll be speaking a little bit about that. Cici's going to be talking about the levels of development. So how do ones fall down? Are you seeing the slide of the themes? Yeah. And Sam's going to do the theme practice for us. That's got a bit of a 1 theme. And then we're going to talk a bit about, case studies. How can we support and resource type 1 clients to move up the levels of development towards experiencing the type 1 virtue of serenity in the heart? So this is part of a series that I've been running. I've done one on type 7. I've done one on type 4. And now we're doing type 1. So I started with the frustration triad. And then I think I'm going to go on to the attachment triad next. So each time I've been inviting people to co-facilitate and do awesome things. So you can see the other two on the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. And then kind of, if you subscribe, you'll get notifications for the rest, or just go back and you'll find them. So today, zooming in on type 1. So this slide is the epic slide I made of trying to fit the whole Enneagram onto one page. And Sandra Maitri and Naranjo speak about how Enneagram 7s love schemas. They sometimes mistake the schema, the map, for the territory. So it's been a big journey for me to go from thinking I know the Enneagram with this picture to it's in here. And that was the trauma-informed training, is the Enneagram is in this whole being of ours. It is wired into our nervous system. It is really an embodied way of processing our experience and information in the world. And it's in the 3 centers that we're processing information. So our awareness is the innate quality that we have. How do we interface with reality? What do we notice? What's in what's called our salience landscape? What do we notice? It's very particular. Our field of vision is type specific. It's quite phenomenal. When you start analyzing type at a phenomenological level, you discover, oh my God, I'm living in a totally different reality to other types. My way of inhabiting my body, my posture, the characteristic tensions of type are quite patterned. So I've gone from looking at this diagram and teaching this diagram to saying, ignore this diagram, focus on what's going on in here. And that's where the more trauma-informed approach comes in, is it's not diagnostic at all. It's not pathologizing. It doesn't follow, most importantly, this idea of what's wrong with you. So you've got to get rid of this baddie villain ego of yours and fix yourself so that you demonstrate the virtues. It's really not that. It's about what happened to you that you needed this reality strategy and that you learned to deploy this particular reality strategy. And you learned to read the world in terms of this reality strategy, because that was the best thing that you could possibly have done in your early developmental environment, in your early holding environment. So the perspective is that this strategy that you have, that you deploy actively as a defensive approach to living, serves you immensely and disserves you. There's a flip side. There's some derailers built into it. And ultimately, the strategy doesn't really deliver the real deal of what your true heart is looking for. So say an Enneagram 7 is looking for joy and happiness. The way that they go about it is actually guaranteed to lead to the opposite. And that applies to every type. So in the case of Enneagram 1, seeking perfection, the method of the one ego for trying to achieve that perfection that they have a sense of leads to failure and hurt and damage that is the opposite of what their heart knows to be true at a spiritual level. A refinement, a beauty that ones are capable of experiencing, a refinement of grace and a treasuring of reality for what it is, with all its imperfections. It's like a sparkling diamond quality to one's awareness, and they mistake perfectionism for that. So really understanding the trauma-informed movement helps us to stop diagnosing people. We just stop doing that. And we sit with our clients and we appreciate them, and we know that we're the same as them and we're exact equals. We're not more enlightened for having the Enneagram. We've just got a really helpful tool, and we partner with them in a very humanizing way. It's very client-centric. So, sorry, that was my phone announcing a delivery for my mom. Let me just mute myself for a second. My mom's in her bedridden state is making some very strange food requests, and we have decided that no matter what she asks for, she's getting. So yeah, so it's really humanizing, it's very kind, and it's just a way of working that is not punishing of the ego, which I find quite often happens in Enneagram land, that we can be quite brutal about the ego and think we need to kill it or get rid of it. It's not like that. So we also appreciate intergenerational trauma, historical trauma. Our parents did their best with their traumatized nervous systems, their limited awareness, their fixations. So, appreciating that our intergenerational trauma and our need for certain defensive strategies is carried down, and maybe it can stop with us. At least some of it, as we heal, we do the work for the people around us and for our employees, our children, our families, that we have more capacity to hold more without acting it out in destructive ways. So that's what trauma informed is about. It's got various dimensions to it. The most important part from a coaching perspective is resisting re-traumatization. So there are various other pieces, but for me, this is the crucial one. That when we've got the Enneagram, this laser beam precision of saying, I know your game that's going on there in your type, that we don't shame our client, because our clients very often arrive in our room feeling like something's wrong with them, which is a symptom of childhood trauma. And then if we collude with that and tell them, well, I know what's wrong with you and I can fix you, we're actually re-traumatizing them, and we're keeping them stuck in the sense of defectiveness and what Steve Marsh calls the hamster wheel of self-improvement. And this is particularly relevant with Enneagram 1 clients. They come into the room with an agenda to fix themselves, to get rid of parts of themselves, to be better, to improve. And how do we meet that? And how do we not collude with that vicious inner critic? How do we lead or guide a process with them where they can get in touch with the part of themselves that knows that deep down they're actually valid, okay, that their autonomy, their will, their inner wisdom and knowing is profoundly more authoritative than what I could say, or my Enneagram advice, or whatever kind of rules they might be hoping to have, because that's their strategy. Tell me how to do this right. How do we work with that in a way that we don't add more onto the trauma of, I can't trust myself to be good and to get it right. And that right doesn't mean what I thought is right. Right is not the perfect cloud in the sky. That's what one of my clients said this week. Right is, I'm here as an adaptable adult, meeting ambiguity, making mistakes, learning, and that the beauty of life is in some of this imperfection. So how do we work with clients in a way that we help them to have an experience of themselves as meeting emergence in a way that they can trust themselves? So that's the opposite of re-traumatizing in Enneagram 1. And then another thing I just always want to highlight in my teaching, which is the trauma-informed movement and the embodiment revolution of understanding type, is in the body. It's in our nervous system. It's in our hypervigilance or restrictions of, I've got to be on edge or whatever it is. It's in our scatteredness in some types. Insight is the booby prize. So teaching someone the Enneagram and telling them all about this and and they're saying, oh, that's so interesting. It doesn't change their inner experience of themselves. And when I think about making things conscious, so bringing things from the conscious to unconscious to the conscious, it's not a cognitive exercise. It's not mental insight. It's, oh, I can include more of my experience. I can notice the tension in my gut. I can notice my shallow breathing. I can notice the tension in my jaw. And as I breathe into it, and as I bring self-compassion to the emotional drivers and triggers, and become more aware of the tacit triggers that make these things happen to me, or how I respond to certain things. Let's not say make these things happen. I respond to certain things. That as I bring compassionate self-observation and inclusion, so making things conscious is a process of inclusion, enfolding, allowing, welcoming all of me and all of my experience. So this is just a little schematic about internally, we're making the unconscious conscious. And on the outer side, we're becoming more conscious of others' experience of us. So at an overt level, many Enneagram teachings are about the obvious. It's like ones do this. They've got their list and they plan their holiday in advance and they know their budget and those kind of things. That stuff is the outward manifestation of type. But when we work in a trauma-informed way, we get closer to the core heart wound that the person's trying to compensate for. And also, I think quite a lot of emphasis on others' experience of us and the relational dynamics, the energetic level. Trauma-informed work is very much about interpersonal neurobiology. So when I'm in a more grounded and relaxed state at ease, I signal safety to other people. And I create a certain kind of energy where other people can relax. So for ones to also understand the interpersonal dimensions, or any type, incredibly helpful. So at the superficial level, I'm going to share these slides so you can see the naranjo kind of shock of and horror of the kind of harsh mirror that the Enneagram holds up in terms of the subtypes. This material comes mainly from Naranjo's lectures. And he spoke about the degradation of consciousness. So that when we are born, we are here with wide open awareness. We're here with an open heart that's innately wired for human connection and belonging. We are social beings. That's what we long for. We long for loving connection, a sense of welcomeness, a sense of you good enough just as you are. I love you just as you are. And we don't get that in childhood. We don't. We have to conform. We have to behave. We've got a parent who's off the rails in some way. They might be codependent or an alcoholic, or they're carrying trauma. So we're born into an environment where our parents can't create safety for us. It's just every person ends up with an Enneagram type because of these deficits that we're trying to cope with. So there's small t trauma, which is chronic micro-relational trauma. So for example, the mother's mostly on her cell phone and the kid has to really struggle to have their needs recognized. That's micro-relational trauma because it's consistent. Parents not making eye contact, not attuning. So that'll be a small t relational trauma. Big T trauma is your classic adverse childhood experiences that most of us think of when we think of trauma. We think of, violence, neglect, abuse, that kind of stuff. So small t is the chronic stuff that forms our sense of self. And it's really interesting when you start seeing the consistent patterns in type of how the small t trauma, day after day after day after day, had a strong impact on the person's nervous system, their sense of identity, the sense of how to survive around here. And that's then what we appreciate. And then working in a trauma-informed way also, working with state change. So we're not going into the childhood narrative necessarily and saying, you know, that this happened, that happened. That's insight. That's archaeological digs. Doesn't really change. What we're trying to work with is state change. So these are quotes that I've gathered from Enneagram 1 clients. It's part of the research that I'm doing for my PhD on the Enneagram and the cultivation of the inner observer. So one speak about when they're triggered and when they're in what Tom Condon calls the trance of type. This is the stuff that's going on for them. In their body, they're tight, they're wound up, they feel like a machine, they're trying, stiffness. So these are the sensations. When they feel in their inner observer and they've dropped back and they're at ease, they experience the virtue in these kinds of terms, close to beauty, sensitive, alive. And there's a lot of consistency in the types of language that the types use. Catherine Forth has done a lot of work on this, on the vocabulary of the types. And it's really interesting to start getting a sense of the metaphors that people use and working with those. So this is how I work with the Enneagram in the room, is what are you experiencing right now? Or how was it for you in that meeting? Let's go back to that moment. What was going on? What imagery were you seeing? What was in your body? What feelings were moving through you? And then accessing the virtue through, okay, let's talk about a time when you felt at ease, amplifying that. So working in this way, and with Enneagram 1, what we find is what we call a pride-based compensation for feeling bad, basically, in childhood, is that I've got to stay in line because I'm going to be punished for being bad, or that chaos is going to break out if I don't stay in line. So some Enneagram 1s grow up in an unbelievably chaotic environment with no structure. Like I had an Enneagram 1 client, both her parents had mental illnesses. She had to take herself to school. Any structure that was in her life, she had to create. And it was her way of warding off chaos and the fear of chaos and corruption and badness and falling out of society and goodness itself. And the pride-based compensation for the one, for that sense of badness, is what Naranjo calls angry judgment, or like a righteous anger against the world, judging, pushing away, resisting, but mainly it's a frustration with the self, that the natural feelings that arise in us, we self-resent. That's called the anti-self action. We push our natural feelings and impulses away. We don't like ourselves being who we are. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do the opposite. The defense mechanism is reaction formation. So I'm going to be perfect. I'm not going to act out this anger that I'm feeling, and the anger and rage. No, I'm going to have the right face, and I'm going to be appropriate, and I'm going to be reasonable, and I'm going to rehearse carefully what I say so that I get it right. And you can't accuse me of being a bad person. Unfortunately, these masks don't work at all. And with ones, people can feel the anger. They can feel it. My Enneagram 7 line to 1, washing the dishes furiously because my kids left dirty dishes in the sink. My son screams from across the house, "Why are you washing the dishes?" noisily. Because ones will express their anger, but in kind of passive-aggressive ways. Essex ones more overt. So that's a kind of very, very quick view on trauma-informed work, because I want us to move so that Cicci can talk about the levels. Just before I do that, I want to just open to Cicci and Sam. Is there anything that you think needs to be highlighted a bit more, that's been valuable for you in becoming more trauma-informed? along the way with me, discovering NAM and all this stuff. Is there anything you want to highlight about trauma-informed from your perspective? How's it reoriented your work, maybe? Maybe Sam, you start?
I love the picture on the slide that you've just put up, where you have
this one.
Yeah, this one, but in the middle of the sensation in the body, where you have all those pieces that are just sort of, you know, that they're disorganized and they're kind of going off in different directions.
Yes.
And then you have the one on the other side where there's this kind of sense of there being a sort of self-containment and a coherence.
Exactly.
And there's another image that's on the front of a book, which I really enjoy, called Safely Embodied, where it shows a journey where there's a body that's in just kind of almost like pixels, and it's kind of sketchy and it's dotty, and then it moves across, and then at the end, the sort of 5 journeys across, you've got a person that looks like a person. And for me, I think the journey in becoming more coherent in myself and having more space and capacity for presence was literally a journey of landing in my body and arriving in a body that had felt really kind of sketchy. And I mentioned the idea of highly performative to something that feels more like it belongs to me, like it's something I can inhabit. So there's a safety in that, which is Cicci language, but it's kind of a hard-won piece to recognize that movement into something that feels experientially more coherent. That's been my journey with this stuff.
And those words are very important in NAM and in trauma-informed work, is a sense of coherence, an experience of inner coherence and inner organization, that I can have these overwhelming feelings, but there's a me having the overwhelming feeling. And maybe in half an hour's time, that feeling's going to have gone and there'll be a new one. Whereas in the first picture, the feeling comes, it completely overwhelms me. I identify with it and I start doing my time. So the journey of coherence, organization, I know what to do with this feeling. This feeling is called hopeless despair. That's okay. I can have that feeling and I can feel it and I can learn from it and, process in a genuine way in the heart. So I'm grateful for those words, coherence, organization, and kind of becoming a home to yourself. Thank you, Sam. So let's hand over to Cicci so you can maybe any comments you have and then segue into the level stuff.
You can stop the screen share for now.
Okay.
You can wait for that. We'll have a little screen share break.
Okay.
Hi. Just love seeing some people. The thing that sort of stayed with me from what you just were talking about was the one trying to organize their face and not be this angry person, but actually sort of censor themselves. And I remember early on when I started teaching the Enneagram, and this feeling when you started teaching and you get your first descriptions and what you say about the types, that's your own. That wasn't what they told you, what your teachers told you, or what you read. It's something you just, that was yours. And for the one, I think the first thing that came to me was how contained they felt. It wasn't just not being angry. I mean, that's obviously where it comes from. But then it's like the whole id, or, whatever base animalistic instinctual stuff that we carry, the whole sack just goes, because you need to manage everything in a way, and this sense of containment also in body work. It's sort of you can see it on the one walking across the room, because it's a sense of, yeah, it's just this tension. So like a micro tension, you can have macro tensions as well. My husband is a one, he has those, but just this micro managing yourself in a way.
Oh, that's such a good metaphor.
Was the containment sort of stood out to me. So anyway, I've lost, track of all kind of timekeeping, obviously, since so I'm not sure. But I want to say some stuff about the levels as such, and then we'll go into the slide.
Let's just give a hard stop for Sam to be able to have enough space to do a practice. Sam, like half an hour. We need half an hour for the practice, right? Okay,
that sounds good.
So let's talk about the levels, and we can build in some case studies and make sure that by 8:30 we've closed on content and moved to process.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. So I go to the slide now on levels, Cicci?
No, it can wait.
Okay.
The slide is the one. I just want to say some things about the levels. I don't think that needs so much illustration. And I think something that's important to say, I don't know how much you all know about the levels, if you know the story behind them. Very briefly, it was Don Riso who he was physically sorting characteristics or traits into piles for different types. And he was realizing he kept ending up with like 9 piles for each type. Because, obviously this really open and gracious and flexible person, still knowing what's really right. That's the one on level 1. That's the really sort of self-actualized one. And how can that be the same personality type as this horrible individual at the end of the scale, who will usually, regardless of type, they will kill either somebody else or themselves, if we just put it very, succinctly. So how can that be, that types? And so that's where he started sorting these different characteristics and traits for each type, or attitudes and behaviors, as they were later named, into to some kind of structure. And he realized he kept coming up with these 9 distinct levels. And he also realized he could describe each level type independently. He could say, this goes on at level 1, this goes on at level 2, this goes on at level 3. Level 3 is in Samantha's. We have a certain level for trees, I think. And he sort of, which is again part of why I love Don and Russ's work, that you can really see these so clearly how it all fits together. And also, it was interesting that the levels were 9. I don't know if they would have been, by default, or if it was a bit of design in there as well, because Don was partial to the number 9, obviously. And also to the number 3, because equal overall across the circle was the fact that you could see that in the 3 topmost levels, there was a kind of quality of what he called health. He called them levels of development. I'm not crazy about that word, but I think the term is the only thing I don't like about it, because to me, you develop that direction. You develop onwards. We cannot develop backwards. That is impossible. However, we can fall down this balance. I call them levels of balance usually, and not least, they're about ego identification. It's just a mouthful and sounds kind of pretentious to talk about ego identification. I haven't got that much ego identification today. Like it's So levels of balance is what I usually call them. And he could see that between level 3 and level 4, like after the chunk of 3, there was another chunk of 3 and another chunk of 3. And there was a quality that was quite distinct that shifts between these 3 layers of levels, as it were, or these 3 bands So which he called the healthy band, the average band, or the healthy, the average, and the unhealthy levels. So, and I'm going to be talking mostly about I'm not going to talk about level 8 and 9, because those people won't come to your practice. If they do, you will very soon send them to a psychiatrist, I think. So it's not that, I don't think that's, there is a huge need for that. However, level 7 and up, I think we need to know something about. And we also need to know something about the more general level bands of healthy and average. So this is what I'm going to be focusing on. So now you can please share the slide. Thank you. You're muted.
So just want to show the generic poster slide quickly before we go to your slide, because this is so people can just see the 9 levels of health and 3 bands, level 1, 2, 3, the kind of liberated level, the average, and Russ says like 4 is the average good day for most of us, average day, and then the lower levels. So that's what Cicci was referring to. I nearly called you Sufi. That's a good thing.
Very fitting for me, since I haven't got that much ego identification today.
No, never.
Only read about it.
So there's the poster. You'll get it. These are the 3 bands. Liberated,
you'll get them in my poster too. It's just that
now we're going into the Cicci slide. Yeah. That's more about the 1.
It's basically the same thing. It's just that it's only the 1, and also it's just 7. So we can imagine 8 and 9 down there. But for space reasons, I decided not to go there. I also have a bigger one because I can barely read on this one.
Do you want me to make it full screen?
It doesn't matter to me. I have another screen, so I can have it.
Okay.
It's just that I have my camera on my laptop, whose screen is sort of smaller. And so one thing I do not agree with in what Ingrid said before Sam was talking was that, and I don't know that you would argue this, but you said that our parents carried trauma or whatever are the reason that we're the type we are. And I'm on the side of, you'll have this type, even if you're born into a enlightened setting and family and everything is just dandy, which obviously doesn't happen. But even if we do, we cannot come here as human beings and be all of it. It's just, it doesn't fit inside a human system. That's sort of how I see it. So
yeah, I agree.
I mean,
yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that everyone has an Enneagram type, no matter what.
Yeah.
And there are kind of subtle or big deficits of some kind that we're trying to adapt to.
And what I'm saying is that even if there wouldn't be any deficits at all, which is obviously a theoretic idea, but even if that were the case, I think I would come here with an Enneagram type anyway. I think that comes with a human form, as it were. Or, it doesn't really matter, but that's where I come from, which is to say that even if I deal with all my crap, and even if I become this really enlightened guru, you're going to tell the difference between me and Ingrid or me and Sam, because it's not the same flavor. Even masters, they have their flavors. And to me, the important piece of that is not to argue whether type is, that or whether it's because of deficits or not. The important bit is we're not meant to get rid of it. It's not something that, because when I hear that its type is a result of deficits, then I will think that if I work through my stuff, type is going to go. And we get these people saying, oh, we're all the types and I've transcended. And sorry, yeah, I shouldn't say that, but I think those people have not really got it, because we will tell the difference. Then it's much harder to tell the difference, granted, to when people are very sort of liberated compared to when they're in their average range. And at level 5, you're going to see the whatever type being, the one. for tonight's example, you're going to see the 1 at level 5, but you're going to see the 1 at level 1 too. It's just not going to. That was a very strange sentence, wasn't it? But it's gonna be subtler, which Ingrid said, but it's going to be there. The flavor is going to be there. So the point is that, you know, at level 1, there is really no. Don mapped out a fear. I mean, the basic fear, we all know about the basic fear. The basic fear of the 1 is being bad, corrupt, and evil, basically. And then there's secondary fears for every level. And there is, from level 2 and down, there's going to be a basic desire, which results out of the fear of the last level. So if we're on the top level here, and this wise, discerning, noble character has this thing come, because there is, which you very briefly mentioned, the heart wound, and the heart wound for the 1 is the grief-stricken heart. It's just this sense of goodness having disappeared, or, you know, perfection having been dissolved somehow. And there's just this grief. And this is going to be there because, again, we come here with this format. We come with the body, we come with certain genes, we have this, and it seems to be prepackaged, possibly because we're supposed to do something here on Earth and find out something about something. And so when this little thought comes, which is, I need to restore this perfection, I need to restore the goodness, I need to see to it that I, at least, and everybody else, hopefully, but that I need to not be bad, corrupt, or evil. But so when this little fear is the ego comes and has a little toe in the door, if I buy into this, and this in the church kind of religious setting, this is the devil for all of us, regardless of type. It's going to say, and especially for the 1, because the 1 is, you know, resisting the devilistic or animalistic bits. But if I believe this, I'm going to come down to level 2 and have this desire to be good and to have integrity and, you know, be beyond reproach, so that I can be this example to people. And by the way, level 1 is called the level of liberation. Level 2 is called level of psychological capacity. And just to be sure, level 2 is still very, very not, relatively speaking, not very ego identified. And it's like in all these 3 levels, the top levels, the ego is like, there is this kind of, I get the sense of a symbiotic relationship between the ego and whatever is not the ego here, because I need to book my tickets for the plane ride, and I need to make a meeting for tonight's, and I need an interface to interact with the world and with other people. And for that, the ego works fine. That's why we have one, I think. But the thing is, in developing our ego as children and throughout our growing up into adults, we tend to sort of lose this connection. So we're not really starting out from level 1. Once we're aware of anything going on, like we start school or whatever, we're already going to be a fair bit below that level. So the fall from grace format is just a schematic. It's not necessarily that this happens to us in life. But so we keep going down these levels. If I am this good person beyond reproach, and I'm this reasonable and moderate and impartial and everything, by the way, these words in italics are the ones on the top 3 layers coming from, or the top 3 levels coming from the 7. Talking about the arrows and how because people say the arrows are debunked. We don't only move to this point in stress and to this point in integration. No, of course we don't. But an integrated 1 will, this is the 1, the life-affirming bit and the optimistic bit and the curious bit at level 2 and the visionary bit at level 3. It's in the 1. It's not that there is 7. You can borrow stuff from 7 any day you like, and for whatever reasons the ego prefers, or the non-ego, whatever. But this is how 7 is sort of already sprinkled across the more balanced levels of 1. And I put the 4 bits, which is the point of stress, furthest out to the right to sort of highlight them a little bit more and how these things creep in. And again, they're part of the 1, but they're only part of the 1 below level 3. And this is the reason they're called stress points and integration. And so, well, I think what happens between level 3 and level 4, as I said, that's the first very interesting shift, or for most of us and probably most of our clients, the shift that's most in focus. And that's, as I said, it's like we have this symbiotic relationship with the ego. The passion will be there for our Enneagram type, but it'll be, if not benign, then at least we're aware of it. When it's not that it's like a wild animal and you're living in a teepee in the wood and you sort of, you coexist with a wild animal. It's a bit like that with the ego, and that's okay. You don't lay down and allow the wild animal to make your schedule for the day, or to, you don't cater to it. But when you come down to level 4, you do. So what happens between those 2 levels? That's an interesting question. And so Don came up with this thing that he called the wake-up call for each type. And how these are phrased will depend on which book you read, because obviously the wake-up call is not this phrase, but is just described by a certain phrase sometimes. And the one that I picked was a sense of personal obligation. And if you say that to a 1, they're going to go, well, either there are 2 kind of responses to this. Either they go, what? Because it's like, fish cannot recognize water because they swim in it, and it's just it's business as usual. Or they say, duh, because the sense of personal obligation is my constant companion. Because I'm a 1. If I'm an 8, it's going to be the belief that I have to push to make things happen in my life. Of course I have to push to make things happen in my life. Hello. So we have these, and we sort of, it's just part of life for us. But when we start doing inner work, we can become aware of, oh, how does this sense of personal, it's a quite abstract phrase, isn't it? Sense of personal obligation. What does that look like for you? How am I in my daily life? How is this sense of personal obligation showing up? Oh, there's this tension in my shoulders, and there's a little bit more constrained feeling over my chest area, or whatever it is. And we can just look, would this, if we're a 1, or want to try the 1 on for size?
I just want to say something there, Cicci, because really those 2 pictures that I have of, the kind of triggered state is almost the permanent semi-triggered state at level 4. So you can recognize a lot of the language and the feelings and sensations. That's a kind of level 4 state of how I'm walking around the world in my trance of time, which most of us are most of the time. And then the movement to the green with the inner coherence and the organization and more home in oneself is kind of the move up to level 3. So you can just link those 2 pictures, I think.
Yeah, it's, yes.
So yeah, if you could.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think and looking at my watch. So anyway, I think what's interesting about that, to unpick this a little bit for myself, I can check, what does this sense of personal obligation look like for me? What is it for me? If I were to phrase this, maybe, I mean, this is to fit everyone, so obviously it's very vague, but what is it for me? Is it that I can't really sit on the couch for more than 10 minutes before I think I have to get up and do. I have to, I have to do something meaningful. Can't just sit here. Or which type of everyday situation. So you might try to find what is it for me and substitute this sense of personal obligation for what is it for you. And you might substitute it. I mean, the wake-up call, the point of the wake-up call is it's the fear at level 3, which is, are your principles enough to keep you or others in check? Because if they're not, your id is going to go nuts and destroy everything for you. Basically, that's what the devil or the ego will have you believe, or it will try to have you believe that. And if you do, that's when you end up at level 4, and you will have all these, as you said, as Ingrid said, going to be in this low-grade trance standard mode, basically, where you might not recognize the wake-up call, actually, because now you've shifted your alliance to ego to such an extent that you're already taken that at face value. You have this sense, you have this personal obligation, you're obligated. This is your duty, do it now. So if you're already on level 4, I think the wake-up call format is going to be, as Ingrid was also saying, the result of that. What does that do? What does that, create? How does this? And we can stand on the floor and try these, poses or whatever out. And just, if there is this tiny, tiny tension in your tummy, you can try and just exaggerate that a little bit and see what that is. And it's going to be very clear. And you're going to be feeling that there's this jolt of recognition. I've done this for me and for my 8, and thinking, this is how I lived my teens. This was a permanent state. I wasn't aware of it because it was me. And we get so used to these things, it's almost hard to part with them because it's me. So anyway, also here is where fixation will show. Actually, level 4 was called the level of imbalance at first, which I think is kind of funny because it's all imbalance from there down. But then they changed it to the level of fixation, which is very pertinent, I think, because if you read the original Enneagram teachings, they're going to say that resentment is the fixation. And if you listen to it, which Russ sort of said, this is a feeling, this is anger and resentment. Resentment is just a kind of boxed in, little more comprised and sort of contained sort of anger. So that's not really what is the one doing on a daily basis. And he came up with the word judging for the fixation, which is much more of clearly a mind thing. And when you mix this judging or the judgment of everything, and for absolutely everyone I know, it's going to be, most of all, it's going to be yourself. It's going to be judging yourself, especially if we put Ingrid's whole trauma thing on this. You're going to be judging yourself for having this, for having experienced it, for having the reaction to it, for not being able to control yourself, or for all of the above, possibly. But also you're going to be judging much, much smaller things all the time, because that's what we do as human beings. But when the one mixes this judging habit, that the ego will say, this will help you. You need to know what's right and wrong. So you need to judge stuff so makes perfect sense. And then something else happens, which we call center scrambling, which is that the one who is sort of at home in the belly center or in the instinctual center with the doing will start, the ego will say, one center is not enough, let's rope in the next one, the one next to us, which for the one is the heart center. So I'll start as a 1 in the average range. I'll start sort of, I use emotions to fuel my doing. So there is an emotion fueled doing. And this is the reason where you read in certain books, they say that 1s and 6s and 2s are head repressed. And it's like, have you ever spoken to a 6? they're not head repressed. But what happens is I need my emotions to fuel what I believe is right, and believe for one in this case is very much a gut thing. It's an instinctual. I know what's right. I can feel it in my body, and to sit down for all of these impulses to correct stuff, to steer the ship right, to be this example, whatever it is. For all these impulses, if I had to sit down and check with my head and see, does this ring true? And sort of be this open space that the head can be when it's in balance. That would take too much time and too many resources. So what I do is I substitute that for my superego, or I substitute my superego for that.
Cicci,
Sorry?
I'm just wondering if we can have a little bit of discussion about case studies to bring this to life, because it's technical and it's detailed, and I kind of want to personalize it a bit so people can relate it to their clients.
Yeah, I was just wrapping this up, so this is good. We can do that now.
Okay, carry on then, if you haven't got far to go, because I'd like to let you finish on that.
Yeah, and this was it. It was the hallmarks, so to speak, of the wake-up call, which then is the scrambling and the fixation together, and which creates this sense of personal obligation. So my question would be, how do you see that in your practice?
Yeah, because I love this. The detail and the precision is absolutely awesome. So let's try and humanize it in a way that, how do you see this? What does it feel like? And some examples. So Jill, have you got a question or comment?
I have a comment. So Cicci, I love this. I'm trying to make sense of it for myself in my oneness. So I'm looking at level 3 and I'm looking at the word disciplined. And then I'm looking at level 5 and I'm looking at words like strict and punctual and controlled, which kind of to me are disciplined. So I tried to figure out for myself while you were talking, the wake-up call being the sense of personal obligation. So how is that different to discipline and commitment? So in my own mind, I thought to myself, I wonder if it has to do with, like you were saying, an alignment with the centers. So for instance, an example that I can think of where I maybe took part in a karate tournament and I was injured, but I still drove myself to do it because, I'm disciplined and I want to go ahead. So that's kind of my question to you and to the group. Would it be that? Would it be the unalignment? Would it be where I'm kind of overriding one or two of my centers and hurting myself in the process and just being the dutiful kind of, I can carry on like soldier on thing? Or and it has to do with the musting and the shoulding. So I'm kind of like trying to figure out for myself. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
I think so. I think you're making sense. And from where I said, these words, by the way, the words in the middle and the fears and the desires, they're Don's from his original work. And how I make sense of it is, or I mean, I make sense of what you're saying, but how I make sense about what he's saying is that in this disciplined, it's all going to be just one word is going to be fit a bit of everywhere, depending on what you put with it. So that's one thing that is sort of in this, if it's together with ethical and fair and civilized and visionary, it sort of has a different ring to the discipline than if you say it's the punctuality and the controlledness and the repressed feelings and the impatience. So that's one bit of it. And the other is that in the level 3, there is this heart connection, which I haven't even got to yet, possibly won't get to yet, but there is a heart connection, not in the sense of the one connecting to the heart and scrambling the centers, but in the sense of every one of us being sort of heart challenged from level 4 down, because and not in a type triad, in a center triad kind of way, but it's just, we're not all there. We're not open. So what you said about and I need to,
Soldier on.
deliver what I came here to do, which was a karate tournament, was it?
Yeah. So what you're saying is making sense, because if I'm heart repressed, that means my centers are out of whack, and I'm actually overriding. I'm not really taking my whole being into consideration, which would be kind of respectful, and it would be honoring my whole self rather than thinking shoulds and woulds or musts and checking those boxes. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's a very good way of sort of an overall filter to put on these, is that in the level 1, 2, 3, we have this heart access. And this is the deeper heart. It's not the heart that you scramble then in the next set of levels. So it's the sort of, the pure heart qualities. And in the level 4, 5, and 6, it's not the openness and the heart and the possibility that's driving you, it's the ego and the shoulds, hence fixation. So the mind comes on, and again, from a more fixated perspective, not from an enlightened, obviously, perspective.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. And Joel, if I can bring my 2 cents worth on knowing the difference. For me, knowing the difference is the essence of how I try and work. Is, are you being tacitly triggered in a wound? And is your strategy that you want to deploy driven by fear? Is it driven by especially a sense of urgency? Like, I've got to do this now. I don't have other choices. This is what I've got to do. I've got to get up and I've got to soldier on. I've got to pull myself together. I can't sacrifice my routine. So the strictness comes from a different place emotionally. And I think that's where Cici's alluding to the heart as well, is it's not caring, it's not gracious when we're in our time. It's like, I've got to do it. And there's a sense of inner urgency, obligation. And that's why I like to speak about type almost as an addiction. We've spoken about that. Like, the type is the fake cure for the discomfort, distress, pain, wound. And when we realize, oh, this is where it's coming from, there's an urgency, then we can say, okay, do I really have to do this type thing now? It's coming from that. For me, as a 7, it's an agitated place. It's a restless place. Like, I've got to find out whether I can go and live in Tibet tomorrow. Like, okay, wait, calm down. What's going on? What am I feeling? What pain am I avoiding by thinking now I must immigrate to Tibet?
I think that agitation makes sense to me, and I feel it too, but it's more around I should and must.
Yeah.
So what's helpful in my oneness is sometimes I offer myself a do the opposite thing practice, where I really, like, I feel like I'm obligated to do my workout because that's, what I must do to be a healthy human, and I must stick to the plan. And then I actually don't do it at all, because and that actually makes me realize that the world didn't end, and maybe I can have a bit of leeway and a bit of grace, and I can just, so what, we just do it tomorrow, and I'm tired now. And so, but to get myself to that point has taken quite a lot of practice. But to let it go is something that I wouldn't usually do.
Yes.
It's been useful, actually, and lovely in freeing myself from some of the musts and shoulds.
Beautiful. And that's what Tom calls as a change strategy going against. Like, little micro experiments in not doing what your urgency, what your agitation, restlessness, shoulding, efforting, pressure, whatever the pressure of the ego is, to just stay and not do it. One of the examples of homework that Lucille gave to somebody on a program we facilitated together was to tell an Enneagram 1 to take something off the shelf at a supermarket and put it back on the wrong shelf. And some of the ones were like, you've got to be kidding me. So yeah, just to like break a rule that you would never have thought of breaking, like your schedule,
Yeah.
missing a workout. Hey, instead of doing the workout, I'm going to go for a walk in the park.
Yeah.
Give yourself, as you said, leeway and grace.
Yes.
So
I
those,
found that useful in my own practice, and also in my coaching with Enneagram clients. I've sometimes offered them do the opposite practice. And it's been helpful. It's insightful because then you see the urgency, like the thing that's pushing me to do that thing, and you feel into it. You know, there's kind of a sense of I discover, wow, in not doing it, how that thing drives me unconsciously. So, yeah.
100%. And then making a home for yourself for the urgency. Like, yes, that's part of my experience. What does it feel like? Bringing the compassionate curiosity to the driver. And when we do that, there is a kind of mutation and it softens, and we realize I am home to my suffering. And that Thich Nhat Hanh thing that I've spoken about a lot of time, I am home for you, my panic. I am home for you, my rage. I am home for you, my should. Oh, welcome. But then filtering it through the three centers, that for me is also helpful, like filtering the should through the mind, for one, of do I really have to do this? Is the world going to end? Asking yourself that question. For me, that's taking the urgency and filtering it through a truly discerning mind. You know, ones are very discerning, but the discernment gets distorted in the ego levels.
Completely. And often discernment doesn't take the instinct into consideration, because mine, I can't speak for other ones, but often my instinct is so repressed, it takes me a while to know. Like I know up here, I don't always know in my gut, you know, and then I have to sit with it a bit because it's so that channel is not well used. So I really have to like, and also what do I want? Because normally I do the rule. I do the thing that I should do.
Yes.
Maybe I don't want to do that thing. And allowing for that is a process for me, even now.
100%.
And other ones.
100%. And that applies to all types, like what center is offline. And it takes a lot of time to get in touch with that center because we're so unfamiliar with it. That was the thing from a childhood trauma perspective that wasn't welcome. So I just amputate that part of myself, put it aside, get rid of it. I've got unconscious defense mechanisms that prevent me from accessing it. So thank you so much, Joel. You've given us so much. Raymond.
So, just kind of working a little bit with that trauma-informed space and working with brain-based approach. And what I'm kind of exploring is this idea of the polyvagal as you go down from that safe ventral vagal of safe and connected in the first three sessions, three sectors, like you kind of open, you're available, there's an awareness of connection. And then as you move down into the sympathetic part of our nervous systems, that sense of personal obligation is a disconnect from that ventral vagal when there's like a sense of the beginning of being hijacked into that space that this is up to me. And then there's a constriction and a narrowing and a hardening. And it almost like as you can go down the levels, it's almost like you're kind of moving further and further into the sympathetic, that fight or flight part of our nervous systems. So I can really see it's quite fascinating to kind of see how it almost you get to a point that it's just nothing is enough to keep you. And then eventually you'll probably drop into your dorsal. But what I find quite fascinating is that basic fear of there's something wrong with me is driving me down it's driving me down my ventral. And it's kind of having someone saying to me, actually, you're okay. Wherever you are, you're okay. It's okay. And then it's like, opens up the possibility of recognizing that when I'm in that sympathetic, I don't have clarity to really know, to judge myself even. And then being able to have an experience of being accepted with positive regard allows my nervous system to kind of relax. And then I can slowly kind of come up back into my ventral. So I love these levels and how they cross over Obviously not perfectly, because they're two kind of different models in a way, but there's some kind of like intuitive insight that's helping me a little bit.
That's so brilliant. And it does cohere, because when we triggered, we constrict into our type more and more. And it maps beautifully and perfectly. I'm so glad you made that connection. Thank you very, very much. That's super helpful. So we're going to transition now. Because of time, we really want to give Sam the right amount of time to take us through a process. So I hope that you've got a good sense of a trauma-informed perspective on type. There's nothing wrong with you. It's about really appreciating your strategy for coping with things and what happens when you're triggered. If your basic fear is triggered, say one gets criticized in public in an important meeting, they type sets in, and they start doing all kinds of things to process those feelings and to compensate. And the movement up the levels is very much, in my experience with clients, the experience of coming into safe connection, realizing my feelings are valid. Hey, my rage is actually valid too. And what if I bring my thinking online and bring my awareness to my experience and really appreciate my experience? Then I stop following the rules, hell-bent, and I start, wait a minute, what's my intuition here? What's my true discernment? When I bring that beautiful quality of wisdom and nobility to my experience and to my inner and outer experience, how that changes so much. So I'm so grateful for your contribution, Ray. It's really resonant with the whole trauma-informed paradigm on time. So if we can go from there to hand over to Sam to take us through something. You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, let's hop out of screen share for a moment. So what I'd like to offer you is a practice and give you an experience of a practice that you might find a helpful practice to offer to clients. I think there'll be lots and lots of dots that you'll be able to join between the practice and the content that's preceded it. I'm not going to highlight all those pieces. I'm just going to offer you the practice. If you wouldn't mind making sure that you have something you can write in, a journal or just pen and paper. And if you would like, we're going to be working with some imagery. So if you'd like to have that imagery a little bit closer up than just on the screen, grab your phone and get it, so that you can take a picture, because then you'll be able to work more closely and intimately with the image in a moment. If you haven't got a camera, that doesn't matter, because it will be on the screen as well. It'll all make sense as we unfold. So if you just take a couple of moments to make sure that you have those pieces, and also if you'd like to, just have a little stretch and a breathe and a move, and then I will practice my screen sharing possibilities while you do that, and then we'll just come back together in 2 minutes. Okay. So the first part of this is just going to be to kind of create a little inner map, of a little self-connecting inner map. So any of this that you want to just observe, that's fine. You can just sit back. Anything you would like to be invited into, please, I hope you will enjoy it. So if you could just become a little bit more aware of your body having a connection to the earth and a definite relationship to this whole gravity thing that keeps us on the planet. And that sense of being connected downwards, and there being points of connection in your body that are meeting the downward and that are anchoring you securely in place and in your body in place right now. And allow your breathing to offer you that connection as you breathe and you allow your breath to do its thing. Allow it to just connect you, particularly at the bottom of your breath, at your out breath. Allow that out breath just to connect you more deeply with your sort of sense of being seated in a body. And as your breath rises, allow that rising just to encircle your heart space and move up into your head, where some of your breathing apparatus is also. And allow it to connect you with upward, your vertical axis, and how you connect with air and sky. And just allow the next few breath cycles just to take you on that little journey that connects you all of a piece. The out breath seating you, the in breath encircling your heart, holding space for your heart and coming up into your head and your all those pieces of connection, your eyes, your ears, sense of smell, your sense of taste in your mouth. And next time you come into that sense of seatedness, in that kind of lower part of your torso, just hang out there for a moment and allow your breath just to occupy that space, to kind of move around in it, almost as if your breath becomes a soft beam of light moving around in your torso, seeing how it is down there at the moment, right now. And ask that part of your being to offer you a sound or a shape or a colour that just reflects how it is right now. Just allow that to arise, to come, to arrive. Just notice it with a kind of curiosity, accepting whatever comes. And just allow that out breath again just to show appreciation for that sense of connection to gravity and to that part of your being. And then when the next in-breath comes, just come back to that sense of encircling your heart space. And let the whole of your breath cycle now just hang out in that area, your chest area, including your arms and your hands, that sense of this kind of connection with self, with emotion, with all that you can have feeling for. And allow your breathing again as a soft beam of light just to encircle your heart space and just to arrive in there, like you're kind of tending to it for a few moments. And just noticing how you are in there right now, and ask your heart space to offer you a word or a quality or something that you need to know. Just that sort of sense of your heart communicating to you about how it is right now. And then a few more breath cycles just to fully appreciate this part of your being that can do all of these things in the way of connecting and receiving and being in relationship. And allow your breath just to rise and to appreciate that part of you. And then allowing your breath again to kind of come down into the seat of your being, to rise up through your heart space, and then to arrive at kind of the topper point of your breathing apparatus, where your breath kind of becomes quite close to your mind, your open mind, your receptive mind, your curious mind, all the amazing things that happen there. And allow your breath to just sort of circulate around that space that probably includes the area just around your head where you're meeting air. And just ask your mind to offer you an image, an idea, a phrase. Just see what arises up there. Just with curiosity. See what your head wants to offer you. See what wants to land in there for you right now. And then taking that breathing, finally sort of circling in that headspace and showing appreciation to yourself for this incredible part of your being, your capacity as a human. And then just allow that breath cycle just to settle down back again, past your heart space into your seat of your being. And a couple more cycles just to feel how all of this is you and it's together. And just take, please, just a moment just to make a note of that snapshot and any of those pieces that arose for you. There is a shape, a colour or sound in your belly, maybe a quality in your heart, maybe an image, an idea, a phrase that arose in your head. Just make a little note of those. And then when you're ready, just please give me a little sign, a little thumbs up or something, and I'll move on to the next stage. Okay. Okay. So I'm hoping you can see an image with 4 parts to it. Okay. So what I'd like to invite you to do is just to allow your gaze to settle on these 4 images here and allow one of these images to choose you. It might be a surprise which one wants to choose you today. Just see what happens there. So when you kind of know that the image that belongs to you, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the single images of each one. And when your one passes, you can take a photograph if you'd like to of it. But this image will be there at the end too, so you don't. It's just an option. Okay. So if you chose this one, or this one is your image today. Okay. And this one. And this one. We've got this one. Okay. So if you could just have that image now as the thing that these amazing eyes of ours can do, these amazing things where we have peripheral vision and we can take in all kinds of things. We've also got the part of our vision that can really focus and allow one thing to become, the thing that we are really paying attention to. So doing that with your eyes, but then also doing that with your whole being. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to have that image, if it's on your phone, have it now kind of just where you can take it all in at once. If you're working with the screen, just allow the other pieces, the other images just to fall away so that that becomes your world for the moment. And as you take in that image as a whole, you kind of noticing its forms, its colours, its shapes, its textures. I'd like you just to notice. Just go through that journey with the breath again. And as you take in that image with the seat of your being, and you allow the seat of your being to meet that image, ask that image what it wants to share with you, what it wants to share with the seat of your being. Is it offering you a sound? Is it offering you a colour? Is it offering you a particular shape? Just notice where it's meeting you in the seat of your being. And just jot down a word or two that will just be a souvenir of this moment of meeting between you in the seat of your being and this image. And continuing with this journey with your breath and your being, allowing your breath to come up again and really connect with your heart space. Notice that where these chambers of your heart, these parts of this feeling capacity that you have as a human, where they're meeting this image. Just ask what that image is wanting to share with your heart. Maybe it's just pure, maybe it's a pure feeling. Maybe there's a message in there, maybe there's a quality. Just notice what's happening between your heart space and that image. And allow the breathing just to, allow that to deepen as much as you would like it to between you and the image. And then if you'd like to just take a moment just to create some sort of souvenir of that in your journaling, of that moment between the image and your heart space. And then allowing the journey to come up into this incredibly receptive part of your being, which is your curious, open mind, where you can receive inspiration, you can receive new thoughts. Notice if this image has one for you right now. Maybe it has something it specifically would like you to know. Maybe there's a word that it needs you to remember. Or maybe there's something it needs to tell you so that you can summon some of its energy or influence on another occasion. Maybe there's just a piece of wisdom that it's got for you. Just to make a note of any of that you need. And then I just like you to take a few more breath cycles just to come back to your image with this whole sense of your being. And I would like you just to create an inner gesture of appreciation for anything that you were offered in this practice. And then I'm going to just come out of the screen sharing and just like to ask, really. So that experience was something, I invited you to do. It was for you. It was a resourcing practice for you. It may have been quite personal. It may have gone to all kinds of different places. And there may be something in that for sharing, and there may not, and that's absolutely fine. But I wonder if there is anything that was in that experience for sharing, on any level, if it's something you want to share about the experience of the centers themselves and how they were communicating with you, about the imagery, and maybe if it offered you an opening in some way that you feel that you would like to share about, and how it kind of connects you with on your Enneagram journey. All of that is entirely valid, and there's a spaciousness in there that I'd just like to invite you to share into if you would like to.
Hi.
Hi, Miranda.
Yeah,
Hi.
I chose the red flower, and when I got to my heart, it was, this is way too much. But when I got to my head, it was, this is interesting. It's not too much at all. So it's just a very different reaction I got.
Yeah. Thank you. And
I'm not an expert, so I can't sort of come up with anything more than that.
Oh no, the only thing I was asking you to be an expert on was what happened for you in that moment. That's the only thing. In a way, just the experience. I mean, how was it for you just as an experience to do it?
Well, my heart felt quite small, but also quite subtle. But my head felt much bigger and more able to cope with stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting. Does anyone else want to say anything, possibly in the map that the image offered you? And then if you kind of think about the kind of the little map that your centers offered you at the beginning, was there any kind of, thing you noticed between the difference, or was there anything that emerged in working with the image?
I'm happy to share something if nobody else feels prompted. So I loved the relationship that you evoked, that the image chose me, because that was a process that, that I discovered. It was lovely. It was very different to pick one, and the image was so happy with me. It was satisfied, and it was saying, keep doing what you love. Keep talking to pictures. Keep talking to trees. Keep doing these kinds of things together. Like the tree was so happy that we're doing this, and it feels like it's the right thing. And it was such a sense of friendship, and that the tree was affirming, like, and the tree saying, you've got so many friends, and the trees are all our friends. And I don't know, just felt this real warm, settled, satisfied sense of rightness and goodness. So thank you for that.
Thanks for sharing that, Ingrid. I think there's probably ways that there's maybe some mapping. Oh, Nicola, I'm seeing your hand. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I thought when we started, you did the first imagery, so the feeling in my gut was really moving. But what I was surprised was when I looked at the image, which was kind of the weed kind of thing, the minute it talked about what do you notice at your gut, I saw the heart in the center, which I was quite surprised that from the gut that I would see the heart in the center. And
Yes.
And then when we moved, and I thought, oh yeah, that's just at, the gut is at the center of it all. And then I thought, when I moved to the heart, I straight away saw the little dragon that's hiding there, the little being hiding in that plant, which was absolutely beautiful. And it was kind of like kind of that light, that connection, that life connection with everybody, but kind of like it was camouflaged in there, but obvious when I looked with my heart. And then when I moved to my head, I noticed all the tentacles that are flowing out from that part that were then not touching the grass, touching many other things, so that the thought was, and it came back to you saying the prayer this morning, Ingrid, you say something, you do something, but you have no idea where it's going, all those places that it's going, what it's touching and where it's going to go to. So you've got no sense of control, that in your head you want to control all that, but there is no, it's going everywhere, touching everything. So that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what kind of experience for me.
Oh, thank you. It's moving. And you're talking about there being a little creature in there. And I'm thinking about the eye of the heart that just notices the detail, the intimate detail, because I didn't know there was. I'm going to look at that image again. I didn't recognize, I've not worked closely with that image. And I had not seen that.
Felt like a little elemental, a little dragon, a teeny bitty dragon there, just at the top part in there. It's very looking out. Yeah, it just became obvious as soon as you said the heart. I'd never seen it before. Yeah, it's interesting.
Was there anything that the imagery wanted you kind of to know or feel or experience that you could kind of connect to your Enneagram journey? That's an open question for anyone here. In that kind of little joining the dots little way. in terms of the whole session and the pieces, it would be really, really cool to see if there was something in that mapping that would connect you to some of the pieces that we've been learning about the levels. And you know,
can I just say
sorry.
something? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Miranda.
No, you go on.
go Nicola, and then Miranda.
Cicci was saying about the heart and the higher levels, and I was just interested that the heart was looking at that. I wrote down, and the word I wrote down was life connection, kind of thing within there, life connection, which was interesting. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Miranda, did you have something on that?
Well, I think I'm way behind on this. I thought I'm a 1, and I thought 1s were meant to be heart types, but I'm very much head led, but perhaps that's an indication that I haven't got up the levels yet. I don't know.
I don't know about any of that. I think what I was wanting to offer was a little moment to sort of see what's going on in these 3 different parts of us. You know, that the Enneagram is always talking about us as being 3-centered beings, and and we've got this mind, and we're scrambling here and we're doing that. But what's actually going on in these places? And it seemed to, by connecting with nature and seeing what's happening in between, maybe something would shift or something would move, and we might feel slightly differently after connecting with something in nature and seeing if that had moved anything in any of these centers. And I don't know if that any of that was relevant for you, or
Yeah, I think I'm just out of my depth, actually. Sorry.
No, God, no, please don't apologize. It was simply a little offering. But thank you for trying it, thanks for giving it a go.
I'm just using my head and my heart to deal with it.
The thing about these kind of practices, Miranda, and maybe this might be helpful, is it's impossible to get them right. It really is. That was something a movement facilitator said when I was doing a movement practice. He said, you can't get it right, so you can't get it wrong. So whatever just happened for you, whatever it was, like I'm out of my depth, that experience, can you just enfold that experience and say, oh, I felt out of my depth. That's welcome and that's fine. And that's kind of what the Enneagram is trying to teach us, is that can we bring love and compassion to our own experience and to enfold it and to say it's okay. And when we do that, suddenly new things begin to open up. So if there is a rule, or if there is getting it right, it's this is okay, and this is okay, and this is okay, and all of it is welcome, every bit of it. So thank you for sharing the fact that you felt out of your depth, because that's information as well. That's information for you. That's fine.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming, and thank you for going through the process and being here and sharing.
Yeah, 100%.
No, it's been interesting. Thank you.
So I'm going to hand back to you, Ingrid, for closing words and thoughts and all those things. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for just, entering into a little experiment, little 3-centered experiment with imagery. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for showing up. And I want to turn these, what I call dialogos sessions that I'm hosting with types, into more of these kind of collaborative, experiential things, rather than slideshows and us lecturing at you about the Enneagram, is that we walk the talk of trauma-informed and do things together and experience trauma-informed modalities like what Sam just took us through, and see how different that is to analyzing ourselves. Like, the quality of insight that we have is very, very different to kind of trying to fill our head with Enneagram insight only. They go together, and it's a top-down and a bottom-up process of intelligence and wisdom arising from our body, arising from images, arising from all kinds of channels. A dream is a channel of information, as well as Enneagram. And how do we appreciate and synthesize these different kinds of experiential knowing to discover what's really going on for us? So, yeah, I hope you come to some more of them, and I'll advertise them through the same channels. And just to know, you'll get the slides, and there's some stuff in there about courses that we're offering. And Cici's got a series of one-on-ones. Sam's got beautiful programs. I've got 2 coming up next year, the 5D trauma-informed coaching and a team facilitation course. So when you get the slides, you might just want to look at those if you want to do more of this kind of work. But thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing. Much, much, much appreciated.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
on the
you.
Isle of Wight, Miranda.
Yeah, I'll look out for you.
On my bike.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks for joining us, Jill. It was so cool to have you here.
Yeah.
You're
You're
on
rocking
mute.
that pink. It was really rocking that pink.